The agenda until someone else.
Sometimes
It's
setting on later, not all.
Welcome, everyone. It is February 18th, 2025, and this is the 9 a.m. board briefing agenda. Please let the record reflect that Commissioners Jordan, Waldrop, French, and Kearns are here in the conference room. Commissioner CUNY is out this morning. We're going to lead off with Mike Burgess, our county lobbyist, with an update from Olympia. Take it away, Mike.
Thank you, commissioners. Couple, 3 or 4 new items for you to look at and that are reflected. Couple, 3 of them are reflected on your legislative agenda, and then we'll go through the bill list. But just kind of generally where we are since we didn't meet last week. Just to update you that we're fast approaching the first cutoff of the session. That's the 21st policy committee cutoff. So bills have to be out of their policy committee of origin. And then we'll make their way to the fiscal committees with next week's cutoff on the 28th. And then they will then transition and be on the floor until March. I think it's the 12th-ish, passing the bills from the houses of origin. And then by the end of the month of March, we'll probably get into when the budgets start to come out and dealing with those issues. So still very policy bill oriented. The pace of bill introductions has slowed down significantly, which makes sense because bills have to be out of their committee by Friday. I have Scott here. So if you don't mind, commissioners, I'm going to jump out of order. To the bills there, 1135. Actually, sorry, Rocky, if you could scroll that back to the top. 1135 and 5197 deal with local government planning, their GMA bills, and I'm going to let Scott talk about those. But I think long and short is they're problematic for the county. I'll let Scott go into more why, but just to note, commissioners, 1135 and 5197 are not companion bills. True companion bills start off with the exact same language. Those 2 bills did not do that, but they in effect do the same thing. So they were just drawn up differently. So I just sent you the one bill, but one of the 2 has moved from committee. And I guess I'll just let Scott kind of cover what the problematic part is, because he can certainly do the technical stuff better than I can.
Good morning, commissioners. Mike is right. They are problematic in the sense that they turn sort of on its ear the well-established tradition in planning and zoning of a prior non-conforming use. And what that means is if there is something in our code or anyone's code that is currently legal, but through an act of the legislature becomes non-conforming, typically you have some period of time to fix that. In this case, what the bill says, if you have something non-conforming and you try to correct it, but the act of correcting it is also found to be out of compliance in some way, you can't simply rescind that and go back to what you had before because you will be found out of compliance yet again. So it forces you to, or forces us, to go fix things that you wouldn't otherwise have to fix. And really the kind of unintended consequence of this is cities and counties that see something that needs fixing are just not going to do it. They're going to leave it as non-conforming because that's still legitimate until you try to fix it. And then you find yourself back out of compliance and you have to keep going back. And it's not exactly the situation that we find ourselves in from the 2016 settlement agreement, but it's a huge can of worms in the sense of it'll just simply prevent somebody from trying to fix something because you find yourself not being able to go backwards, and so it's sort of a bill looking for a solution, in our opinion.
And then, Commissioner, just for some background too, that I think the proponents of the bill have said that it was not their intention to kind of open this up as broadly as they have, but in reality, that's what the language does. As Scott has looked at it, and then as other folks in Scott's seat that represent or that work for other counties around the state, so there's unanimity that this is very problematic and needs to be dealt with. So I wanted to bring it to your attention and get your direction to go forth and maybe communicate with our delegation members that this is problematic and that there needs to be some sort of a fix.
And just to tag on what Mike is saying, we have worked with King County specifically on this. So this is not an east or west difference. This is pretty much a universal feeling that this is a bad bill.
So, Commissioner, I guess I'm looking for your direction to, continue to work that issue along with my colleagues to work towards a fix.
Question.
Yeah, go for it.
What would the fix be that we would be looking for? Just to clarify.
I think, Commissioner Jordan, to narrow the bill to what the intention was originally, to not do such a broad fix. And I think Scott can I hope Scott can talk a little bit more about that too.
Well, Commissioner Jordan, the simple fix is to kill the bill. Because I'm not sure there is a true fix on this. The intention is really very broad. I guess the fix would be to at least respect what we call prior non-conforming uses. And if you have something like that, try to fix it, and the fix is found out of compliance, you should not be penalized if you simply go back to the code you had before. So, in a sense, that would be the fix. But, I don't think the real proponents of this seem to think the penalty clause is useful in here, and we don't.
Commissioner.
Go ahead.
So Mike, what is ultimately is the goal of the bill just, I mean, you can't speak to it, it's not your bill, but
Right.
is your thought that the goal is, and maybe Scott can help answer this, to just get communities into compliance faster with the Growth Management Act, or what is the ultimate, what's the motivation here?
Go ahead, Mike.
I think you're hitting on that, Commissioner. I'd have to go back and rewatch the hearing to see what the comments were, but I think it was almost sold. That's can be a little bit pejorative. I shouldn't say that about a colleague, but they were representing the bill to be kind of almost a technical fix, is the way I understood it. But again, I'd have to go back to that and get back to you. And I can talk to you further about that when you're here in a few days.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any opposition with you working with colleagues to fix. I see, I'm reading through the bill report. I see both WASAC and AWC signed in as other, but as you read through the comments of what the sort of the synopsis of what the other was, it was just saying that they need more clarification. There's issues understanding what exactly this does. So, I mean, you got AWC and WASAC not supporting it as is. So I have no problem with you working with your colleagues to either better this bill or kill the bill. So
Okay.
that's just me. So
yeah, I'd be in favor of just killing the bill.
Okay. Well, unless I hear otherwise, I'll work with my colleagues on improving or ultimately trying to defeat the bill. Okay.
I'll just continue to do some due diligence on it. I'm just seeing it for the first time, so I want to make sure I'm understanding the issues better.
Fair enough, Commissioner. And if we want to revisit this next week, we certainly can. Because this bill's gonna take a while.
That's fair.
It's not gonna move off the floor tomorrow. So
Commissioners, I'm available anytime if you have questions or want to talk about it as well. So
great. Thanks, Scott. Appreciate it. Then I'll just go back to the top of the list. House Bill 1969, law enforcement aviation support. This gets at the county's helicopter issue. The bill kind of sets up a program that counties and local governments can access. I think it establishes 4 of them around the state. Spokane would be the one in Eastern Washington. Look, the bill's being heard today at 10:30, and looking at the sign-in sheet, most of your law enforcement community in Spokane is supportive of this bill. But I think it's a absolutely a net positive, and it aligns with, though we had a capital budget request in on the helicopter, this is another way to go about doing that. So, I mean, I think it's a very good bill, commissioners.
Okay.
I think that's
Okay.
good.
Any questions? Good. Got a couple of our local folks on there.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, sounds like we want to support that one. And then the next one, 5703. This is the city's bill dealing with the waste to energy facility. Thanks to Commissioner Jordan for testifying on the bill yesterday. Commissioner Jordan, if you wanted to make any comments on it, that'd be great. But I have to imagine this is one that you would support as a board as well.
I can speak to that. I mean, the bill is basically in line with what we already have on our legislative agenda. It is providing an exemption for the waste to energy plant in the Climate Commitment Act's cap and invest system, which effectively, I think starting in 2027 would create a fine or a penalty that the waste to energy plant would need to pay. Landfills were exempted from the Climate Commitment Act. There are other regulations addressing methane emissions, but it's we are the only municipal solid waste system in the state that is subject to this regulation. And as Kyle and Marlene Feist have indicated, without some relief, the waste to energy plant is really threatened economically and may need to be closed ultimately. And so there was a study from the Department of Ecology, or funded by the Department of Ecology, that showed some significant environmental benefits, at least in the early phases of waste to energy versus landfills. The state has funded a feasibility study on carbon capture and sequestration, whether that could be part of reducing the overall emissions from the plant. But it was Representative Riccelli, or Senator Riccelli, and Holy were supportive. There was good testimony from AFSCME, from the mayor, from environmental groups, and others. So I think it's bipartisan and something that's good for our region.
I see there's a number of folks that signed it that says we're testifying, that signed in other. Were they
There was one,
actually like opposed?
I
or
watched
what?
most of it, and what I saw was everybody was in favor, other than 1 or 2 people who just said it should be a extension rather than an exemption. So more time rather than an exemption.
Okay.
Right. I think some of the dialogue too, Commissioner, has been, you know, how this bill would impact Climate Commitment Act and things like that. And I think everyone acknowledges what's being asked for is very reasonable. It's just the worry about how this has broader impacts, I think, is the take I got. And Commissioner Jordan's correct. The timeline issue was also talked about.
Yes. So the opposition on this bill is actually coming from the other side of the state. That do not want to open up that door for the possibility of other plants to be constructed. I know that there's at least 2, maybe 3 other counties that we're looking at incineration. And because of the Climate Commitment Act have backed away. But just want to let my fellow commissioners know that in our agreement for solid waste, we do have the option at any time to leave the city's system and go to landfill. And so, you know, from our standpoint, our goal is to serve our constituents with the lowest cost alternative available to it. And if they do not get the exemption and have to pay the carbon tax, we do have the option of just going to landfill and avoiding that altogether. So It is an impact to the city. We certainly want to support the city, but it is not a unilateral impact in that it'll impact everybody in the county. If we don't get the exemption, it'll only impact city residents.
Gotcha. Okay. But assuming the commissioners as a board, that's a bill you would want to support, given our legislative agenda.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks for
Then the
Justin.
last one, I don't know if it doesn't look like Justin's on. He was going to talk to us about 1813, dealing with the, oh, there we are. Thank you, Justin. Just so while he's jumping in there, this is one of Wasatch's priority bills on the behavioral health side. So please, Justin.
Hey, good morning. Thank you, Mike. Morning, Commissioners and Scott. The Bill 1813, as I discussed previously, revolves around crisis services throughout our 6-county region and the requirement for the Spokane Regional BHASO vision of the Community Services Department to implement crisis services across those 6 regions. It was clear from the implementation of crisis integration, all behavioral health integration with services back in 2019, that some key pieces were missing. How services are essentially contracted with MCOs and commercial insurances to a lesser extent throughout the 6 counties. Currently, we would negotiate separately with the MCOs, and then we ensure the services are provided downstream to our subdelegated entities within our Spokane County and 6-county region. In that process, all rates negotiated upstream don't necessarily reflect the downstream implementation or needs. So the cost downstream isn't always reflected upstream and requires HCA to contract with the MCOs for the Medicaid portion of it, then to the BHASO, then to the service providers. In that, it was identified by some members of with the state that those services were not being, or the money at least flowing down to those services were not being identified to meet the needs of those regions specifically, and that ultimately a further review of reprocurement for Medicaid needed to be identified. So this bill identifies those 2 key areas: reprocurement for Medicaid, specific to contracts with HCA, which includes all services for Medicaid, medical, and behavioral health. So that's one key element of this bill. And the secondary portion of identifying the carve out for crisis services, which includes inpatient services for the BHASOs. Essentially, we went to an integrated system where those were all incorporated within the MCOs. The portion of that, the state is requesting this bill to be carved out so that the money flows directly from HCA instead of to the MCOs to the regions overseen by the BHASOs and for those services. Now, the BHASOs recognize procurement has already been a necessary issue the state's been working on. To this extent, we do believe reprocurement is necessary. It is to identify MCOs. That hasn't been done since 2016. That is something that we recognize both by our communities and members, providers within there, that needs to occur. Better provide for services and recognize the changing needs within the regions. However, that remains a smaller portion to the overall need of the carve-out, recognizing that when we negotiate services with 5 different MCOs and 18 different commercials, that's challenging for us to be able to implement the services within our region. So this bill really identifies a better direction of funding so we can be more responsive. For example, the Crisis Relief and Sobering Center, we will, for the next 2 years, have to negotiate, which is not guaranteed for payment of those services with Medicaid. Now, we're sure that the money is there and that they will agree, but the rates could all be negotiated separately. This bill carves it out and will allow the BHA to determine not only the payment rate for all Medicaid and non-Medicaid services, but be able to act quickly and responsively to those individuals. That includes a lot of different services in the region, including secure withdrawal management. As you may have heard, the secure withdrawal management facility in Parkside, which is the only one in Eastern Washington, closed due to challenging funding ability and then census. Essentially, they couldn't get individuals in, and the rates that we're paying for those individuals, as they identified, weren't sufficient to be able to cover the costs of the facility to run. So both their ENT and secure withdrawal management closed. We very much support this bill, especially the component carving out the crisis services. It would delegate that responsibility to the ASO and ultimately to the Board of County Commissioners with Spokane County to work in conjunction with the 6-county region. Again, more responsive to the needs. The section regarding reprocurement, although we think is needed, I firmly believe that although the need exists, it may not be, nor is required to be, the primary component. And I believe there's some talk on the statewide level of that either being lessened so it isn't forced in 2026 or giving some time for HCA to be able to respond. So that's kind of the background and history of the bill. Any questions?
Any questions? Nope. I think we're
Hey,
good.
So Commissioner, I'll add that to our support list. It's a good bill. Okay. All righty. Thanks, Justin.
Very good bills.
Thanks for your help. And then, Commissioners, I'll just run down the list here of the bills that we've talked about in the past and just kind of give you some updates. That freight railroad infrastructure bill has not moved. It is a fiscal bill, so it would have that extra week. But you can imagine the budget issues that legislators are facing here. And I've really started to hear some of the underpinnings from legislators that anything that costs money is going to be really, really difficult this year. So I think it's the realism of that is hitting legislators now. So these bills that do cost money are going, just frankly, are going to have trouble. And I know that you understand the connection there. 1218 was the competency evaluation bill. It was a governor request bill, Governor Inslee request. That bill has not moved. That was not a good bill for us. The regional 911 funding issue that still is sitting in the House Finance Committee and needs to be, for it to continue in the process, needs to move from committee, but it gets the extra week because of the fiscal impact to it. The law enforcement hiring bill 1435, its companion 5060 is the one that's moving. 1435 is not moved, but that's okay. Usually this time of year when there's companion measures, only one of them will be the one that starts to move. So it looks like 5060 is the vehicle for that. 1700 is the House version of the comp plan timeline extension bill. It did move from committee last week, so that bill is doing what it's supposed to be doing from our perspective. 1786 is the TIF public safety bill. It needs to get a hearing next week. Have asked the committee chair to do that, but because of the fiscal impact, it does have that extra week. Medical. Sorry, go ahead, Commissioner.
Yeah, so I talked to Representative Volz last week, and he indicated that if he could get a phone call from the Fire District Commissioners Association indicating their support, that he would go ahead and make sure that that got a hearing and was able to move forward. But I'm curious why you list it as neutral, since it's a bill that we're trying to promote.
Well, Commissioner, that's only my own note taking. I just didn't move it in the Dropbox thing, so I'll move it. Just completely an oversight. Nothing
Okay.
there more than that.
I was wondering if it's something I said.
No. Fat
Oh.
fingers on my part, probably.
All right.
You know what you did.
I know what I said.
know
I
what
know
you
what I
did.
did.
Tell the truth now.
All right.
Yeah, no, just no. And the reality is, Commissioners, nobody sees this list but you all, so it's just a shorthand thing, and I just missed it, so I'll move it. 1813 is the bill that Justin just spoke about. Same with 1969. That's the aviation bill we just spoke of. I mentioned 5060. Next one at the top of the second page, 5154. This is that auditor's bill. Interestingly, that bill was scheduled to be voted from committee on the 13th. Nothing happened, and it has not been scheduled for exec since. It's in the local government committee still. They meet today, but again, it's not scheduled, or I mean, it could be added to the agenda at any time, really. And then I know they meet at least one other time, maybe two more times. The committee meets this week, but this is one that would need to move from committee before the cutoff. So we'll wait and see what happens with that. But there is language floating around that would address the issues in the bill and give that clarification for the auditor duties. The next bill we just spoke about, that's the one Scott mentioned, the Senate's version. 5404 Public Defense Services hasn't moved, and that's one that would fall into the category of fiscal impact and the cost of it. That will be resolved hopefully when the budgets are released, if there's something like the, if the spending on this is included in that, especially on the Senate side. And then 5558 is not the companion to 1700, but basically the same bill. This is the Senate's version of the timeline extension bill. And then 5635. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Commissioner.
Mike, what's the status of the extension request? Are we on track for that? And Commissioner?
Yes, we are. Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Yes, that bill moved to rules, so it's doing what it's supposed to do, just like the House version.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, for sure. And then 5635, that was Senator Christian's bill. It is set to be, that dealt with the Newman Lake water issue. It is set to be voted on Thursday. And then 5703, we just spoke about that bill. So that is the updates on where I'm at with the bills that have been on our lists and reflected in your legislative agenda. And we'll see a narrowing of this list next time we talk. And we'll have updates on those. So
Yeah, go for it.
from my perspective, that is all for me today.
So Mike,
Yes, sir.
did you have an opportunity to sign in on 1380?
Which one's 1380,
The
Commissioner?
camping one, the illegal camping.
Illegal camping?
Yeah, I believe I signed us in an opposition. Yeah.
Okay.
But that bill had a monster hearing, and a huge sign in an opposition list.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, commissioners. Have a good day.
You too. Thank you. All right.
Can we add one thing quickly?
Oh, yeah.
We still need to put in the SRSC request. And so I know Commissioners Waldrop and Gordon are trying to connect with Representative Hill. We have Representative Graham, who's also willing to do it. I think would benefit from a third and a sixth bipartisan. We can put in 2 House members, we're only gonna put in 1 Senate. That's just the way the system works. So we need to get it in this week. Friday's the cutoff. So
Yep.
I still would hear back on Hill. If it's a go, we'll put it in under Hill and Graham. If it's not a go, we just put it in under the 6th district legislators probably. Or we could let Senator Riccelli let it go in under his name on the Senate.
I would be more than willing to make that request if we think that's advantageous.
I
to
think
the
it's advantageous to have
I did,
both parties.
yeah, I did mention it when I spoke with him briefly last week. And let him know that I was reaching out to Representative Hill. And he's aware of it and supportive, so we can circle back if needed with, but I know he probably has only so many, requests that he wants to put in, right? So we just need to navigate that.
So as soon as we have feedback, I'll just go ahead and put that in if that works. And then we'll also be working with Commissioner French's office on PFAS. Getting that one finalized.
Yeah, and I sent you the spreadsheet and everything on the cross side of that yesterday and stuff, so we can talk later on today and finish out the application.
The Bellevue and Plants Ferry are both in. And unless I hear something else, those are the only 4 going.
And I did talk last week with Senator Riccelli with regard to the Plants Ferry, and he was happy to see that we were moving forward with it. He would personally take and run with it.
Perfect. So that's where we're at, and we need final decisions in it today, because it's our last BOCC meeting before the cutoff. Good. Perfect.
Okay. All right, we are now joined by Sheriff John Knowles and Lieutenant Justin Elliott. You guys are here to talk about the Real-Time Crime Center.
Yes, good morning. We've given you our quarterly update, regular as possible. That's right. Perfect. So we are concluding a very, let's say, successful year in 2024 as well as 2023 with the addition of our staff. That is fully, we were able to get all of our staff on board and get all of our contracts and encumbrances under the wire from the end of the ARPA. And I think we've done that quite well. On that topic real quick, the SkillBridge employee project manager, Eric Green, who's been with us since early on. He's moved on to help Sparber with the other law and justice programs. But we did recognize him with an award for his exceptional work that he did on this project. And we wanted to just point out that that worked out very well from the SkillBridge from HR all the way through the system. So we've kind of just updated our mission statement as we've gone along to make sure we better reflect what we're doing here at the Real-Time Crime Center. We host a lot of tours and just the education. A lot of times people walk away with, but okay, that's actually makes a lot of sense. It's not as complicated as people can make it up in their mind to be. This one, it's our, we are dedicated to ensuring the safety and security of our community by harnessing cutting edge technology, providing rapid actionable intelligence to deputies and officers. And the RTCC significantly increases the chances of suspect apprehension and successful case resolution. And as an integral part of the Sheriff's Office, RIG 9, we're committed to the proactive prevention, identification, resolution, and reduction of violent crimes, fostering a safer community for all. And on the front end, you know, this was a goal or a promise, and we've seen this actually occur now. And I hope to show that the evidence of that over the last couple of years, to where even with some partnerships that haven't come to fruition yet, we've seen that our expectations and have been exceeded. Let me go to the next slide. Construction was supposed to be about 120 days. That'd be in 9 months to get it done. We won't go into a lot of detail on that, but we moved in our staff in August, and it was actually the finishing touches on the construction project wasn't until last month. So that was just a little bit of delay, but we continue to work through it. Oh, can we go back one? Oh, that didn't overlay. Okay, there's a one click. There's a picture behind that one. It worked on my computer. Did it work on yours?
No, I saw this too.
Okay, so the picture behind that one is what it looked like when it was pre-construction. It's really ugly, just trust me. And that is the finished product for those that haven't toured it yet. We've been very pleased with the workspace. We get a lot of compliments from those that come visit from all over the country with how it's set up. Okay. Getting into budget in a moment. So in addition to the ARPA funds, including the general fund for construction, WAPTA grant funds, this is kind of the total graph of our budget allocation. Technology, as you see, is nearly half, and construction, which is done now, and staff, which will be continuing through the end of the grant. Okay. This is kind of the progression of the analysts that we've hired. And as they come on, our capabilities, our statistics go up, and our valuable impact. They ended up all having dispatch experience, which has been very helpful with them understanding our systems and how to interact with all of our different agencies. So this is for this part of RIG 9. This is our staff right now. Dustin Bonsgard, as of this month, has been reclassified to the Real-Time Crime Center supervisor from interim. So I'd like to congratulate him on that as a new advancement. Brad Cushman from IT. We've been very happy with that relationship with IT, and he's been extraordinary in his role. And then our 3 new tactical analysts, Katie Johnson, Amanda Vandenberg, and Dave Hegland.
And all 3 of those analysts were prior employees here at the county in some respect prior to coming here. Katie Johnson was our grants and contracts person before she took this. And both Amanda and Dave were longtime dispatchers for the county before they moved to Shrek and have now come back to the county again.
On a public safety impact, we played a critical role just this last year in 140 success stories, just in the second half of 2024, including 89 charges for arrests, 54 stolen vehicle recoveries, and 2 missing persons located. Okay, so that's our operational hours with just 3 analysts. We don't have a minimum staffing. So if they're gone to training or they're sick, we're potentially dark during that time. Hopefully in the future, we can change that with other partnerships. But we've been able to do a good job of covering the school hours, which is a big priority of ours. So we're doubling up on day shift right now during school season so that we can react quickly to school emergencies, threats, and that is like the #1 fire alarm for us. Anything has to do with school, we're logging into the cameras, we're communicating with the deputies, SRDs, school staff on a regular basis. But we do extend into all the way to Saturday at midnight, which allows our nighttime deputies to have the resource as well.
Question.
Yes.
Can you repeat the numbers you just mentioned about the successes?
Yes, and I'll have some.
They're coming up on the
Okay.
slides.
Yeah, I was kind of foreshadowing from.
Okay, fair enough.
Key
I'll
performance
wait.
highlights. I know,
I'll wait.
numbers. And it's all in this semi-annual report that I sent out to you guys, I think, a couple weeks ago as well. It's a long document though, I know. Just real quickly, technology milestones. Each of these projects are a significant lift for our staff to get these connections. And I don't want to go into the detail, but it can be mind-boggling how much they need to do for a bridge server to connect our cameras to our new milestone server. Our camera on wheels project, I think we're up to 6 now, and has exceeded our expectation. They get a lot of attention and they have a lot of impact on crime.
Hey,
Yes.
can I ask you a question on the cows, the cameras on it? Because I get asked this, if somebody sees one, is that an indication that there has been crime in that area? And that's why you decided to place one there?
Depends.
Okay,
In some instances, yes.
Okay.
We'll have construction sites that get persistent problems with theft and burglary and things like that. And if they call and ask us for one and we have one available, we'll put it there.
okay.
A lot of times we'll have retailers. It's really popular with some of our retailers to call and say, hey, we know that Home Depot and Lowe's, and I think we have one in the valley right now out at it's not Ross, but it's out near the Lowe's
Kohl's?
out there. It's Kohl's. And they end up with thefts and things coming out. It's pretty persistent there, and they'll just call and ask. Or in the case of Move Fitness early on in this program, they were having a lot of vehicle prowlings, and so they call and say, hey, could we get one of these stationed out here? And every single time we put them out there, the theft and the vehicle prowlings just stop. And then when we tell them that we have to take it and move it somewhere else, we took their children from them. And it has actually motivated a few places to invest in their own, just because they're very, very effective. And I will say, now, we were asked by the Downtown Hospitality Association if we would be willing to dedicate a cow down there and move it around between some of the restaurants that are dealing with, higher rates of disorder. And we had one available, so we were able to do it. I don't know if that's something we can do long-term. We're kind of having conversations with them about how they can invest in their own infrastructure as far as cameras and license plate readers, and through the Spokane Sentinel system, move it back, the information that they collect, to the sheriff's office. But for the time being, we have the ability to provide them a cow. And so we have. We've used it one other time downtown, and you'll probably see that in one of these slides. And they just love that it stopped all of the things that were causing problems in those areas for about 2 weeks. And then once the people who were causing that kind of stuff realized that, we might not be watching it 24/7, 365. It is being recorded 24/7, 365, but things kind of started to pick back up after a couple of weeks. But we just moved it and then, had those positive impacts somewhere else. So.
Yeah, the majority of the placements are data driven, either by complaints or specific crime data we have. Once in a while, we have gaps in our other technologies. We want to say, hey, what is this area collecting? Maybe we collect plates or other video in a certain area or special events. So I'd say the majority of the time it's data driven because of issues, but not every time.
And from time to time, if we have a specific investigative need and we're not even trying to hide that we're watching, we'll park it right out in front of somebody's house that we know is engaged in ongoing criminal activity. We've been amazed at how we've actually had somebody call and complain that we put it out in front of their house and they were dealing drugs in the house, and that's why we were watching. They actually, that was the person who called and complained about it.
He wasn't having it.
Yeah, but he also dealt drugs right underneath the camera, so.
Public right away.
It wasn't,
Park it right out
it
there.
wasn't dissuading his criminal activity, but he was very upset that we had it out.
So yes, down the rest of the milestones, I mean, you can see them there. If there's any questions, let me know. The school project, is still going. We're getting all the schools to change their naming convention so that we can access and know where an individual is in the school right away when we need to access. And then the Peregrine bill, we have 2 Peregrine staff here today working through that, and that conglomeration of data system is being rolled out to our investigators and deputies and analysts next month out of the training center. Okay. Well, there's the visual of some of the cows. The Valley has funded 2 of them that get used in the Valley. This is during the state fair. We used nearly all of our resources during that to public safety at the fair, which was really successful. Okay. And on that note, as you see, those are 2 of those 3 people are analysts. So they're having to go out and move all these assets around that we've acquired for public safety, and they're having to leave the real-time crime center to do it. So that's a gap we've identified is somebody who can help us move those assets around. And I'll give you some numbers on how often. I think they saved nearly 300 hours that detective would have had to go move those assets around over the year. 300 hours of detective work was saved by our analysts going and moving all these assets around for the team.
I will add this lower kind of testimonial that's from the manager of the Arby's there at 3rd and downtown on 3rd here. We actually parked a cow in the back part of their parking lot, which got the alleyway between the businesses to the north and there. They were very, very happy with the results of just having it there.
And the one above was, we had a certain area that needed attention, and we placed the cow there. And this was an online web response we got regarding how happy they were with the impact. And again, they didn't want it moved, but we can only leave it there so much. And this time of year, the solar obviously isn't bringing in a lot of power. So we have to look for places where we can plug in. We have an external plug on them. Otherwise, they have to come back and get charged at the station pretty often. So their time in the field's a little limited during the winter. All right, so some quick stats. See the first and second half of 2024. Success stories where they had an impact on an incident. And every one of these is written out. So they're searchable, and it goes on and on, obviously. But 2024, 257 was our most annual so far, as we've increased the number of people and systems working together. Next. Again, just broken down the types of incidents or persons or missing persons, suspects, vehicles are recovered, charges. We're currently drilling down into data right now of, what does the average deputy or detective impact annually when it comes to these type of charges? And my hypothesis is that we're going to see that as a force multiplier, for lack of a better explanation, the real-time crime center analysts are impacting when it comes to charges, recoveries, overall public safety value far exceeds what, one officer or detective can do by themselves. Okay.
Just a question.
Yes.
So the success output is basically some arrest or stolen vehicle recovered where the real-time crime center assisted or played a positive role in the good outcome.
That's accurate. And it could be from just providing some information that led to the successful outcome, or they could have been completely responsible for it. They were virtually on scene. They got pictures of the suspect. Maybe they solved it. Our analysts I've seen their skills grow so quick, and having that dispatcher background that, they're digging in deep and supporting our major investigations and almost doing, full background work by the time they come in the next day because they're working into the evening. And we're resolving cases early and potentially getting them, ready for prosecution and whatnot. Oh, can I go back one more?
Correct.
I want to explain dangerous situations averted. Our team has found that they are getting hits on stolen plates, and a lot of times they're finding that citizens are not taking the other plate off their car, and when they reported the one stolen, which can lead to a high-risk stop with our officers, and can be a dangerous situation, or other deputies coming, driving code 3 to come back them up. They're getting on the phone, they're calling the complainant, they're identifying if it's their car or not, and they're saying, hey, you need to take that off, go get new plates. And we're keeping track of even that as a value.
Is that like someone steals the front plate, they report the front plate stolen, but they still leave their back plate on? Okay.
When they're told to take it off and
Gotcha.
scrap their plates and get new ones, they'll leave it on, and then traditionally an officer gets behind that vehicle and runs it, and it comes back stolen plate. That's felony level. And you can see what might happen next if communication isn't accurate. Thank you.
Can I ask about the first? What, do you have a percentage of the persons arrested charged that would be violent, categorized as violent crime?
We do have a breakdown. I don't have that exact percentage for you at the moment, but I'll have a breakdown of all the crimes that are related to these. But yes, we could pull that.
Well, just getting back to your original mission statement, really focused on trying to reduce and prosecute successfully, violent crimes in the community. So I was just wondering.
In a couple slides, we'll have a breakdown of all the violent crimes and the numbers based on those charges, but not a percentage yet. Again, on the questions about successes and their overall activity, this is kind of a breakdown. Hours spent, 269 hours spent moving assets outside the real-time crime center, which takes away from them being the crime center, but also it saves traditionally detectives would be moving those around and they're doing their detective work. Tours, 28 tours. It's been very prolific. We're hosting a delegation from Gresham, Oregon next week because they're building their own. And don't let it go unrealized by your constituents and whatnot that we're the first crime center between Sacramento, Ogden, Utah, and here. Other than Canada has one up in Surrey, other than that, we're it. So we've been somewhat of a, as we stated in our initial executive summary, a pilot, not for the state of Washington, we've become a pilot for the Northwest. These are our regional assists to our partner agencies. I think this is a good example of the impact we have, not just within our agency, but to the whole county. And we just had State Patrol in the office the other day because we realized, hey, I don't think we're connecting with them enough. I think they're only interacting with us over the radio. And we want to kind of raise that number with Washington State Patrol because they're on our highways all the time. And you'll see the higher numbers the higher numbers like Airway Heights or Kalispell is because of they have assets as well that connect to ours, being plate readers, cameras, and the casinos. And we've noticed with our placement that it's very important that it's good to have a detection on a vehicle that's wanted or needed for some reason, but then to having officers and other technology nearby to be able to react to it. So that's why you see those numbers. When they're heading out west, they kind of go into a lot of officers out there, and we kind of know they're going to casinos if they're coming down trails.
Okay. But one thing I'll add to that, you'll see, even again, as he stated, when these other agencies employ their own technology, it really does help us support them. Well, I think the city of Spokane just authorized their ALPR program earlier this week, so we will start seeing them deploy more technology. So the numbers of assists for us in Spokane PD will increase. And I think the city of Spokane Valley is doing a touch on their ALPRs tonight in council. So you will start seeing a lot more of us supporting other entities as time goes on. And I know we're having some discussions right now with Spokane Police about how they might be able to contribute analysts, and we'll have to work out an MOU and some cost sharing over the long run. But those conversations are starting to kind of ramp up a little bit.
A lot of crime centers are somewhat a closed ecosystem, and we've gone the opposite way of that in our vision, to be adaptable to agencies joining us, to new technologies coming in. The school wants to employ gunshot detection. We can ingest that right now, but we don't have our own right now. So every system is adaptable to what these other agencies can bring in. Good. So regarding your question about numbers, yes, the primary purpose for this is community violence intervention. And a little small, but you can see all the way from assault first degree down to vehicular assault. Here's our kind of our BARC felonies, so to speak, our major crimes. And these aren't just like the analysts ran a search on the call. They had a significant impact on the incident that led to these charges. 3 murders. I think this is just in the last half of last year. And without listing them all, you can see the numbers there are pretty profound. And again, how many detectives and deputies solely would it take to have this type of impact on violent crime in our county? And there's a victim, at least one victim behind each one of those crimes of justice that are served. And adding in that there was led to the arrest of 327 nonviolent charges and 83 total for violent crime.
Nice. Is the most likely scenario to where this played in was a crime occurred, the suspect fled, the victim saw kind of what the car looked like, and then you caught that car on a camera somewhere within a radius of the where the crime took place? Is that
Prevalent scenario? For example, the Walgreens armed robbery up north just maybe a month ago.
Yeah.
I kind of had this dead end with leads, and one of our analysts was able to go back through before the data expired and found the suspect vehicle based on the description and drilled it down. And within a day or two, the SWAT team was taking that individual into custody for robbery. But it's also, it's our analysts that are digging into, data, social media and whatnot, absent of cameras, absent license plate reader, absent of live cameras, and doing what our Rig 9 traditionally would have done, where a case gets filed, there's an accusation, investigation needs to continue beyond patrol, it sits over the weekend, it gets to a supervisor who assigns it to a detective and or an analyst, and then it goes in their stack of assigned cases for which they're way behind. Now you take all that, and then the analyst is sitting there and does all that work that occurs next week in the moment. It gives the patrol officers the ability to go secure further evidence. It can shorten the potential of going to trial, saving that money or further crimes the person commits. So in these situations, it's a mixture. It can be in the moment on the call assist and identifying, but it can also be after the fact with plate readers.
Well, and part of the investment in the RTCC goes beyond, we talk about the cows, we talk about the license plate readers, because those are tangible things that people can see out in their community that's different. But some of the technology investments we made, and we'll talk about Peregrine just for a minute. Everything in this digital age, we have so many sources of digital information, body worn cameras, our CAD and RMS systems. There's just a wealth of digital data. Well, Peregrine takes all of that in and makes it all searchable. Like Peregrine, if I want to look for any mention of I'm going to make something up, like a white Honda Accord, I can type that into Peregrine and it will search everything we have in Flock. It'll search everything we have, even on our body worn cameras as our voices are translated into text. It will search the text in the body worn cameras for any mention of a white Honda Accord. It will search all of our data with one search, where prior to this, I don't know, it'd have taken days for an analyst to hit all those and get the search terms right and everything like that. It's that powerful, and it makes that big of a difference. And again, it's not what the public sees. There's nothing tangible other than, hey, we're just a lot faster and a lot more thorough at looking at the data.
Peregrine's essentially like Google for our systems. I mean, the data exists there. We're not creating something completely new and mysterious. It's there, but we can find it.
I was just gonna follow up on the analysts. So how many data analysts do you employ then, Sheriff, outside of the Real-Time Crime Center, and do they coordinate that? Because, you're talking about data analytics that aren't even related necessarily to the technology itself, right?
7 outside of the RTCC. So
I can-
we have one for every investigative group. We
Okay.
have an analyst.
And so how is this helping those folks and, you know, like how do those interact?
So the ones who are working in the investigative areas, they are not necessarily dealing real time. They are
Okay.
like, they are helping investigators. They have the authority to write search warrants for social media, do preservation letters for social media. They write search warrants to download phones and
Right,
pull the
okay.
data there. A lot of the investigative analysts do the technical work that I figured out about probably 5 or 6 years ago that expecting detectives to do all of the things that gun carriers have to do, in addition to keeping up with technology and keeping them trained, and then they promote and leave and I gotta start all over again. It just made economic sense to make them investigative analysts so they can become experts in that field. I don't have to continually retrain people to learn and keep up with technology. So the investigative analysts that are embedded in our investigative units, they do more of that type of work where, and they have the capability, honestly, of doing what these RTCC analysts do. But the RTCC analysts are listening to the radio, they're watching calls that are being dispatched right now. They're not dealing with larger investigative cases down the road where you're looking at networks of people and digital evidence and social media and things like that. So their skills are a little different. But we could drop one of those analysts in, we could probably take these RTCC analysts and drop them into the other roles pretty easily. And we could probably go vice versa, except for a lot of our current investigative analysts in the investigative division. They're not former radio operators, so they would probably struggle with some of the other things that the former dispatchers don't struggle with. So I don't know, is that a fair?
Yeah, we
assessment?
found it actually that it created a supplemental value that we hadn't anticipated. Because each of those analysts in their units are specialized in sexual assault cases, major crimes, property, drugs. And then our utility players, so to speak, are our real-time crime analysts who have access. I mean, I'm not exaggerating. They have about 38 tabs open at a time on their screen that they're logged, systems they're logged into. That a lot of those analysts, the other analysts aren't using on a regular basis. So they'll call them and say, hey, you got anything on this? And the analysts in the units are also doing a lot of trial prep. They're testifying in court. It's just a different nature, but like you said, they have a lot of shared knowledge, skill, ability.
And again, it's a lot easier for me to find civilians these days. And I hire them, I train them to do their job and they stay. Whereas with commissioned folks, you all know I hire them, it takes me over a year to train them and then and they tend to promote and move to other places and I have to spend a lot of time and money replacing them. So it's worked out really, really well.
So I think I mentioned to you when you gave us the tour that everything you're doing here is actually on a TV show called FBI. And they have a crime center that does an incredible, and everything you talk about with social media and all of that kind of stuff. If you need somebody to actually see how it works, watch that show, because what you're doing is an exact replica of everything they do on that show.
And not having seen it yet, I will give the caveat that TV gives us a little more credit than we deserve and sometimes shows some capabilities that aren't there. So,
And sometimes showcases things that we absolutely ethically and legally wouldn't do.
correct. So I would give that caveat that we still have somebody there making a decision there. And I've seen a lot of those shows have a lot more automation and some of them are fictitious as well. But yes, the bringing it all together and be able, the skills that they have is pretty profound, but I'll remember to, well, isn't there several versions of it?
Yeah, I mean, it's on regular TV and stuff and I just remind you that, we landed on the moon after we saw it on Star Trek. So a lot of stuff happens that we emulate, so.
Yeah, we're pushing forward. I think we're doing a really good job. We'll talk about, do you have any more statistics? Okay, I won't interfere.
Maybe, yeah, another slide. I'll read the success stories.
Okay, so one thing I will tell you really quick is, we do believe we're having an impact on our violent crime overall. This year, our violent crime was maybe stagnant. Our aggravated assaults were up 2%. Our regular assaults were down a little bit. Even though our aggravated assaults were up 2% over 2024 on our 7-year average, we're still lower than what were historical highs in 2020 and 2021, 2019 to 2020. So we're having an impact. It's slow. We're coming down from a historical high. So I want to see over the next couple of years how this starts to average out. We're having really good success with our property crimes for a lot of different reasons. We've made significant investments in our property crimes units in both the Valley and in unincorporated. The number of detectives we have working cases is bigger than it's been in a long time. But I will say just one data point on vehicle theft across the state. Vehicle thefts are down on average 24%, down 40% here in Spokane County specifically. And we think it has a lot to do with these ALPRs and our ability to get on top of this quick. So, yeah.
Mr. Kearns, just a quick comment. So, I know that the original goal, or as I understand it, because this was envisioned before I came on the commission, but the Board of Commissioners, but the original goal was around the violent crime, but it may be worth thinking about in the mission statement, expanding it to say both violent and property crime, because there are, as you know, with organized crime and property crime can relate to other crime that's happening in the community. And I know our community really cares about seeing property crime go down as well as violent crime. So anyway, it's just a thought that I know the mission statement says violent crime, but really you're making a real big impact in both areas. And so for our citizens to understand that, I think it's important.
I agree with you 100%. And I think probably the reason it specifically mentions violent crime is because that's the prong of the ARPA funds that we were attacking to qualify for the funding, right? So we highlighted that, but yeah, absolutely.
As we move forward, yes.
Yeah, and it has made a significant impact in both property crimes and violent crimes.
Excellent.
Yeah, like you said, they're intrinsically intertwined, those type of crimes, unless you're dealing with like an isolated domestic violence or, for example. So we're seeing that, our biggest offenders, which we've traditionally said are 4% of the population commits 80% of the crime. And when you start looking at how many crimes one individual and what types of crimes one individual can commit, when you are able to interdict that person or stop them in their tracks early on in what we call a crime spree, that's kind of where our biggest numbers of savings and impact in the value of public safety has been. The next 5 or 6 incidents that they would initiate don't happen. By getting it on the front end. And sometimes they graduate from multiple, let's say property crimes or other type of crimes to ultimately a murder or an officer involved shooting. And I think we're going to start to see that a lot of those ultimate numbers go down because of the impact we're having on the front end. So one more point on stats for Peregrine. We conducted an internal return on investment study of time saved for our people, and we've estimated that out at as we get rolling here in the next year or so, about a $300,000 a year savings based on time and staff.
It's
yes,
quite an expensive piece of software, by the way.
it's less than $300,000 a year.
It is less than $300,000 a year.
299.
But it's not much.
234. All right, so as you see, Dustin's on the right there. That's our real-time crime center supervisor. He was one of our investigative analysts assigned to one of our other units, who we brought into this and is now one of the leading real-time crime center professionals in the nation. Say that with a lot of confidence. And he submitted one of our deputies and one of our analysts for some national awards. And I think 7 or 11 awards were given out nationally, and we got 2 of them here in Spokane. So this is one, Deputy Doug Hicks. He's also our deputy that does the Instagram posts for the sheriff's office out in the field. And by using several pieces of ALPR technology and the Sentinel cameras, this was a shooting in Stevens County. We assisted that agency. The vehicle came down to a car wash plaza at Wandermere. Instead of going up and contacting the suspects himself, he was able to stay further off and wait for cover and watch them from those community partner video cameras. And they were able to safely take those individuals into custody on that. And that specific incident was an example of his great work out in the field.
Yeah, those car wash plazas are a Spokane Sentinel partner with us, so they have video from every single one of their locations that they feed into the sheriff's office.
And this is Katie Johnston. She was our sheriff's office contracts and grants coordinator that was working on the real-time crime center and was so excited about it. She put in for it and made Under Sheriff Ritchie very unhappy that that position was vacated, but we've been very blessed to have her on the team. And she was recognized for using real-time ALPR data with also social media and other law enforcement systems to locate a domestic violence suspect and get that person into custody right away.
Yeah, and anecdotally, it's really cool what some of these people can do, where, you know, things are happening real time. Deputies get on scene. Well, the analysts, while they're on scene, are looking at potential suspects' social media accounts, looking at who might be associated with these people that might match a description. And so while the deputies are there stabilizing everything, a lot of times these analysts can come in and say, hey, if there's a suspect outstanding and it matches this description, I think this is who it is. And by the way, this is where they live. This is where they hang out. Go start looking for them there. Well, that saves the deputies from having to do that if they have the capacity to do it at all. And we are just that much faster.
I responded as the initial officer involved shooting commander for this recent city shooting in North Spokane. And right about the time I was arriving up off of, I think it was the north side, Lidgerwood, we had a deputy up north go code 6, which means I need help right away, code 3 cover. I'm like, oh, all our resources down here. How am I going to pull people off to go over there? We found out that, and they weren't answering their radios, a 2-man car. They had an individual come up and cause a disturbance. Our real-time crime center analyst was able to live stream his body cam, see that he was in the middle of a taser deployment, get on the radio and say, the officers are fine. They just deployed taser. They got one down, so that it slowed people down. It gave us some calm. And they know that they kind of have that guardian angel, so to speak, on their shoulder a little bit now that we're utilizing as much as possible. So we got some officer safety involvement as well. So just a real quick indication of the impact on the schools. Swatting, we've identified that by being able to get virtually on scene and put out information, hey, there's not, you know, business as usual at the school. We've found some data that, you know, even on these swatting calls or these hoax calls of school shootings, trauma is occurring to students and parents and school professionals. And the sooner that we can get real data that says, no, this is what's really happening, we're curtailing that or mitigating it. And we're starting to see more and more of those situations. And this is talking about naming conventions and IP addresses. This is why we have an IT person on staff to increase the, you know, the efficiency of us getting on scene there virtually and providing a support to our students. Okay. This one's pretty interesting. We got some photos to follow. This is an incidental based off. Basically, there was an argument that our deputies went to in Millwood. The nothing really got from the statements. They cleared it with nothing. Well, our analyst was able to go back and come across these images. Go ahead. To see that there was a little more than an argument going on. As you see, this is capturing plates, but incidentally, it picked up this incident on the other side of the street. So go ahead. Our animations aren't working.
PDF.
Can you click?
Oh, it's entered as a PDF, not a PowerPoint. Okay. You would have seen several images of people rolling around on the ground and hitting each other, and trust me, it's way cooler.
Oh, you better find that, Ron.
Looks like an outdoor cage match, basically, and it
Really better find that, Ron.
that makes sense.
Got it.
It resulted in domestic violence assault charges based off that. And you're not going to see the video at the fairgrounds. Another cool video. Essentially, you know, we deployed at the fairgrounds. Something simple as a vehicle was exiting out by, I think, the Seagate out off of Broadway, and somebody probably looking at their phone hits a county-owned fence, tacos it. Phoenix security guy standing there watching them, doesn't get the plate or anything, and the car drives off. So it would have been just another county risk management cost. Luckily, it was the plate reader that actually caught it. One of our trailers, we call them our rats, our radar ALPR trailers that we equipped, our team built. And we were able to get a hold of that driver and have his insurance cover that hit and run that he did.
Glad you didn't. I'm glad you grabbed my car because I drove right past that right after it happened.
Oh, did you? Did you see this?
We probably did have it.
I'm sure you did, but you didn't follow.
But you
up on
weren't a
me.
suspect.
You followed
And there's
me.
another suspect that's come forward.
I wish you could see the video where the security guy's kind of scratching his head, walking around. But he was visible. All right, this is we had the cow up in Deer Park to cover Main Street. We haven't deployed up there. At times, we're deploying in different communities to spread it out. City had 10 drive-by shootings from the same subject. No indication whatsoever had a connection to Deer Park. And they had a vehicle description. We were able to run that through our system, find it on the cow's license plate reader, and found out he was always turning. You can see he was turning the same way every time he went up into Deer Park. Ends up like his mom or stepmom lived up there. It was kind of his hideout. And within a day, we had city was up there taking him into custody and no more drive-by shootings. I don't know how many more he'd have done, but it was plenty. So that was a huge win on a violent crime with the cow and assisting our other agencies. We have one more. Yes. So we're starting to find more and more successes with missing persons. This was just about to be a silver alert. We had no idea what this individual was at. Started hitting LPRs up in OMAC. We basically went up to the OMAC entry into Canada, was stopped by Border Patrol agents. They had no idea who he was. Luckily, we called up there and said, hey, we're looking for this person. Like, oh yeah, we got him right here. We will reunite him with his family. So I think we had one show up in like Chalice, Idaho. One time that we had, periodic plate reads, but we're able to, time is of the essence when somebody's at risk like that. And we think that there's going to be more of our recoveries of individuals who are lost or at risk. With as many success stories we have, we could go on and take up your whole day, which obviously we don't want to do. So any other questions? This is just a snapshot of where we've come from and where we're at now.
I just want to say great work. I know you both had a really strong vision around this and you worked really hard to get everything set up the way it is. And it's really showing some great results. So just congratulations on it. Glad to hear that you have a partnership approach to it and that there's some increasing conversation there about growing that, but just congratulations.
Thank you. You got a good team. All right.
Nicely done. Thank you. Okay, next up, we have our county prosecutor, Larry Haskell. Talk about stock grant.
How's it going?
How
I'm
are you?
not here to ask for money today.
That's right. That's because if you were,
Welcome.
there would be no.
They don't want
You have our attention. This is just an update on the stock grant. I did a little extra digging around because I kind of felt that I needed a little more education on some of this myself. So this funding is first of all federal money. And it comes out of the Department of Justice and it's administered at the federal level through the Office of Women Advocacy. And here at the state, it runs through the Department of Commerce. And then it comes to the recipient award winners. And we have had it now for some period of time. This is a renewal. We did get a little less money than previously. So in 2024, they gave us $5,700. $5,700 less than we're getting this time. So we're getting $23,000 for fiscal year, calendar year 2025. STOP stands for Services Training Officers and Prosecutors. And again, it's through DOJ, Office of Violence Against Women. And again, nothing really new here. There's a list in the grant itself as to the do's and don'ts and the subject matters, the services that it can be spent on, and it gives you a nice laundry list of stuff to avoid. Basically, what we do here is we pay for one of our half dozen or so victim advocate positions. It contributes entirely to that person's salary, benefits, or whatever we end up paying out of the prosecutor's budget. There are meetings and that sort of thing that are authorized, and I encourage them to go when we have the travel money. And travel expenses for purposes of the grant to discuss aspects of the grant are included obviously in the positive and affirm the uses for the money. And in a new year, $23,000 to not have to use of our budget or any other money from the board. I just signed this thing recently, and I don't know, has the contract come through the board yet?
I think it's on this afternoon.
Okay. So if there's no questions, I can come back in the afternoon or Matt, but it's a renewal of the grant that we've been, engaged with at the federal level for some period of time. And it's a great use, not only for the office, but also for the community. I can't say enough about the importance of the sustaining and the making the benefits available to victims of crime, particularly in today's day and age when they kind of get shoved to the back of the bus. And so it's always nice when we can bring what I commonly call the only non-volunteer in the courtroom that is now involved in a criminal case. So, any questions for me? Okay, I'll be back later then, or Matt may have you covered. If I could say one thing back to the floor there. So I don't know if you know this or not, but there's a battle going on in the court right now. So the statistics in this individual cases that the sheriff was able to give you about the success is true, and you know that because the defense is fighting it hard. And I don't know exactly where we're at on resolution. I think actually it's not completely resolved yet, but they're looking at the coalition ability of the flock system as Fourth Amendment, or at least Article 1, Section 7 under the state constitution, the right to be protected from governmental intrusion into your private affairs. So there's a wording difference to the Article 1, Section 7 of the state constitution that the state, back when they used to do the analysis, the gun wall analysis. And now they've analyzed all the differences in the state wording, but we're in the courts fighting that right now on the prosecutor side, and as most recently as last week. And it's because of the efficacy of the system and its ability to collate locations and recognitions and that sort of thing, wide scale and almost, at once. So it's going to be interesting to see how the bench rules on that. I'm sure there'll be an update at some point in time, but that's a random, but I couldn't help but give you the information that, yeah, it's effective because they're bringing it to the court and they're using Article 1, Section 7. More to follow on that. Thanks very much.
Thank you. All right. We're joined on Zoom by Aaron Gertel. We do a briefing on an agreement with the city of Spokane Valley to accept $6,732 to assist with marketing and promoting tourism. Take it away, Aaron.
I think you summed it up. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, real simple request asking that the commissioners approve us accepting this award on next week's agenda. We will be using these dollars awarded again for our marketing and promotion of the Spokane County Interstate Fair. Are there any questions?
And this is part of their lodging tax?
Correct.
Questions? I don't see any questions.
Okay, so easy. Thank you all.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Aaron.
Have a great day.
You too.
Thank
Bye. All right, Jeff McMorris,
Mr. Impacio is gonna kick us off.
home insurance.
Excuse me, Commissioner. There you are. Thank you, board members. Jim Amacio for the record. I've had Mr. Valencia put on the overhead screen the handout item that I just gave to you. And the purpose of the meeting this morning is to determine what fund you want a certain recovery that the county obtained from the home insurance company, which is in liquidation. And so Mr. McMorris will be addressing that issue. I wanted to give you some background to refresh your memory, because you're going to be seeing hopefully some more money coming through. And what you do with this money is probably going to be consistent with what we do with other money. Firstly, as the overhead indicates, in 2022, the Board of County Commissioners hired Historical Research. And Historical Research is a company that assists public entities in recovering remediation costs incurred with cleaning up contaminated sites. Right after we hired Historical Research, they advised the Board of County Commissioners that one of the insurance companies that we had insurance with, the Green Acres landfill in 1985, the home insurance company, was in liquidation. And in conjunction with the liquidation, Spokane County, through the Risk Management Department, filed a claim in the liquidation. We didn't know how much money we would get, board members. Ultimately, we came in front of the Board of County Commissioners, and the board authorized the county to settle our claim in the home liquidation for an amount of $100,000. Under the settlement agreement, we would receive an initial check of $25,000, and then the remainder would be, we'd receive depending upon how much money, if you will, was in the liquidation account. Most recently, consistent with our settlement agreement, the board received our first check in the amount of $29,985,000. Out of the amount we received, we have an obligation to reimburse Historical Research 10% of the amount of recovery, because that's what we agreed to in their contract. We're here today for the Board of County Commissioners to advise Mr. McMorris and myself of where you want this, what fund you want this money to be placed. I would remind the board that it's our hope that we're going to have other recoveries from insurance companies that provided insurance in conjunction with our landfill. And we would hope that whatever board decision you make today as to where this money goes, it would also be applicable to the other recoveries we get from insurance companies providing insurance in conjunction with the MICA, the Green Acres, and the Colbert landfill. Does the board have any questions with regard to my presentation? I will turn it over to the expert dealing with money.
So we have 20, just shy of 30,000 back. We'll net 27. Once we pay the 10% owed to the group that did the work for the recovery. Legally, you can just leave it in the general fund. There are no restrictions on these funds whatsoever. For this particular litigation matter, we can get up to $100,000 if that much money isn't available. You know, there's an up to. Other thoughts for the funds besides general fund, you can make a case for risk management. We're certainly involved in this. And then what we're recommending is for the landfill
Closure.
landfill closure fund. The county has had about $12 million in that fund over the last 20 years. There's ongoing cost with those 3 closed landfills over at MICA and Green Acres. So in our view, this is probably the smartest place to put it, along with any additional of that 100,000 that comes. And that's the extent of my knowledge on these landfills. So Kyle's here, Lindsay's here, if you have questions on what exactly the landfill closure.
So as I remember, we have an ongoing maintenance agreement, I think with EPA, but I could be wrong. Might be with Ecology, to monitor those sites in perpetuity. And at one time we had a fund that was providing the revenue to do the monitoring, and that fund is now exhausted. So we actually incorporate the cost for monitoring in our waste stream. I remember this right, Kyle?
So, very, very close. I'll add a little bit of context to it. So the landfill closure account was in essence a diminishing fund as we perform continual maintenance activities annually. Lindsay, we spent about $550 roughly a year on landfill closure activities, and we are approaching the ending fund balance basically of that initial investment. So we are last year we contributed a small amount of our solid waste tipping fees to cover that gap. This year that increases, and next year is basically the last year we'll have any funds in the landfill closure account. So anything we can do to soften that blow would be appreciated.
So thank you. I wasn't aware, I couldn't remember all of the timelines in terms of when the fund would be exhausted and stuff, but would it not be more appropriate that these funds go into that account to replenish that as opposed to going into the general fund account?
That's what we're suggesting, yeah, put it into the landfill closure account.
Pardon?
That's what we're suggesting, that you put it into
Okay.
the land. General fund's an option. So the world's your oyster, so to speak. But yeah, the landfill closure fund makes the most sense from a staff perspective.
My only question would be, so, I mean, these types of dollars that the historical research that they're fighting, I mean, we don't know how much they're gonna find. I mean, there's this one instance, we've got 30,000 of roughly 100,000 that'll come in. But I mean, that's hardly an ongoing revenue stream that's gonna go more than maybe 2 years. Do we really wanna put this into an account that, I mean, my understanding is going to be an ongoing type of expense, correct? I mean, the landfill closure fund, I mean, that is going to be ongoing. There's an ongoing expense, correct? Like,
This is not solving an ongoing
yeah,
issue.
so
now.
I'm
It's
just,
it's money that makes sense from a how we got the money
okay,
perspective.
so I guess my question would be more, is there an item, is there a capital expense? Is there a piece of equipment that you need in solid waste that could that you could purchase with, using this more, I mean, this is pretty close to one-time money. Is there a piece of machinery that you need that would be a better use of this rather than using kind of almost one-time money in something that's an ongoing expense? I mean, yes, you're kind of stopping some bleeding, you're using it as sort of a Band-Aid if you put it in this fund. Is there a piece of machinery that could help with operations and efficiency that would be a better use of it? Still keeping it in solid waste, keeping it in that realm, but is there a piece of machinery that you guys are saving up for that 100,000 or this 30,000 off the bat you can obtain quicker and start using?
We do have, I mean, kind of ongoing expenses. So if you think of the landfills that we have, our closed landfills, all of the infrastructure is about 30 years old and it continually fails, and we use in-house staff to repair those. But to give you an example, we have around 70 groundwater pumps that we operate, and to replace one is anywhere from $2,000 to $5,000. So there are expenses that we could probably easily put toward it if that was the better use, to apply it to a single purchase rather than just inserting it into a fund. But we could always use it.
Basically, would that be a better use? I'm not an expert on this. I'm not on SWAC anymore, so. But I mean, do you think, would that be a better use for these funds?
I'll defer to you, Kyle.
I mean, I guess if it goes into that fund, that's what we are looking at. I mean, we have our operational components that we have to do. Our technicians are out there checking the equipment regularly, and we would absolutely be replacing components of these kind of failing pumps and systems. So I guess my comment would be is if those funds end up in landfill closure, that's exactly what.
They go to that anyway. Oh, okay.
My understanding,
They don't need to
Commissioner,
go into a separate capital account.
All right, but are there capital items that maybe not even related to landfill, but in your solid waste department at the transfer stations now, we operate those? I mean, you're still keeping it in sort of that realm of trash, garbage, solid waste. I mean, is there something there that it would go to better use? And if not, then that's totally fine. Then I'll support you putting it in the landfill closure fund. I'm just let's think what other possibilities there are to use it, since it's not going to be an ongoing stream of revenue.
Commissioner Kearns, as Commissioner French pointed out, in all three landfills, we have consent decrees. The consent decrees require the county to expend substantial amount of money so long as we have those, and one is monitoring, one is closure caps. There's all sorts of things we have to do, and I assume, I'm looking at Lindsay, that on an annual basis, Kyle, we adopt a budget dealing with landfills. And so if you put the money in this landfill closure account, it would be used for anything in the approved budget, is that correct? And so, which would include, I assume, the things that Lindsay's mentioned and new wells.
Okay.
One thing I would ask the board to consider, we're moving along very well in capturing all the insurance companies that have a legal obligation to participate with Spokane County. And we're getting down to the bottom. We have a mediation set up by law with the final insurance company that may owe the county, hopefully, some substantial resources. The reason we're in a mediation is because the legislation in the state of Washington requires mediation in conjunction with any insurance company to determine what their financial obligation is. So getting back to your point, I would hope that this final mediation would bring about some additional resources to the county. And just like Mr. McMorris alluded to, the money can go into the landfill closure accounts, or it could go into any other fund. And we were hoping today, commissioners, that a motion we made by the board with regard to this $29,000 amount to put it possibly in the landfill closure account, as well as, I say this to you, any additional recoveries from these insurance companies, so we wouldn't have to come back in front of the board, but that's certainly up to the Board of County Commissioners with respect to additional recoveries that we get.
So you can do just the 29,000 today. You could do all of this up to 100,000. The other amounts, we think high end would be about 900,000. So definitely a bigger amount. So maybe you want to take that one differently or separately. But would love for at least this up to 100,000. We certainly let you know when we get more money. We got another 30,000, what have you. But at least for the first 100,000, do this. If you want to do all of the other, that's fine too. If you like to come back, but just kind of consider that full amount as you make a motion. If you want to.
Anybody want to do a motion now?
So move.
Second.
Which one?
This is a blank check. I was gonna fill it in.
Up to 100. Do you want to do any
I knew what he was thinking.
I'd make the motion
So
that we allocate any future revenues from insurance claims into the
Landfill closure.
The what?
Landfill closure. account.
Landfill closure budget up to $100,000.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. We will open this up for public testimony. Anybody wishing to testify on the motion just stated by Commissioner French, seconded by Commissioner Waldrop. If you're joining us on Zoom, please use the raise hand function. If you're joining us by a phone, please press *9. Second call for anybody wishing to testify on the motion on the floor. Third and final call. Nobody wishing to testify. We'll close the public hearing and call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Motion passes 4-0.
If more funds come in, we will notify you for sure. And thank you.
Thank you. All right, Matt Zarecor, County Engineer. Like Kyle's gonna join in, and we are talking about some vacation.
Morning.
Take it away. Morning.
Everybody had a good long weekend. Had our cruise out, as you might imagine, for the weekend on that sweet holiday good time pay. So hopefully not too big of a dent in what we're hoping to someday put in the preservation. Just have a quick item for you this morning. We have a vacation. Next slide, please. It's Mitchell Avenue. It's actually an alleyway on the west side of Liberty Lake. If you can see, the area in red is what's proposed to be vacated by the petitioners. The orange was a previous vacation from 1995, just to get oriented. The road just to the right is Liberty Drive, which is the road along the lake, basically. So not too far off the lake. This right of way has never been developed. It's people's backyards. They're just wanting to formally have it to be their backyards. We don't see any current or future use of it. If you look to the south of it, bottom of the picture there's a lot of vegetation, very wet, arguably a wetland. Probably never going to be a road through there. So we believe this is a good vacation and we support it. Happy to answer any questions regarding it.
Any questions? So the orange is already vacated, correct? So, okay, so. Looks good. Have a great day. You too. All right, Ben Bradabo. Our local agreement between the valley and the county, cost sharing.
We'll say that out loud.
Water management. Take it away.
Thanks. Yeah, long title there. This is the stormwater utility is proposing to work with the city of Spokane Valley to update the Spokane Regional Stormwater Manual. Go to the next slide. There's just a few points on it. It was written in 2008 and is used to guide local development. It's specific to our region. It hasn't been updated since then. So our proposal is to update that and share those costs with the city of Spokane Valley, split those costs 50-50. What's prompting the update, other than it's been a long time that we need to update it, the key pieces, we have a Department of Ecology has updated their stormwater management manual for Eastern Washington, and our manual needs to be updated to ensure that it's equivalent to that manual. So we're wanting to update it. We think it's important to have that a local manual, so to take into account not all of Eastern Washington, but more locally specific rainfall patterns and different regulations that we like, and then also to be specific towards the maintenance that we want to have applied when these infrastructure becomes ours. So go to the next slide. And the matter that's actually in front of you would be a request to have an interlocal agreement with Spokane Valley to share those costs. The county would hold the contract with a consultant, $160,000, then split $80,000 for each jurisdiction. And we will draft, our consultant would draft the equivalent manual, and then we would work with the Department of Ecology to make sure that that's sufficient. So we'll have a resolution for you to approve the interlocal agreement with the city of Spokane Valley.
Question? Yep.
So what are, other than changing the date, what are some of the alterations, additions to the stormwater management plan that we already have that we can anticipate being incorporated into this updated manual?
That's a great question.
Thank you. Spent all weekend on that one.
Nice.
Krista Riley is here, and if you have an answer to that, I haven't looked at specific. But I think it's what do we anticipate will be changes in the manual from?
Other than dates.
You know, that's what we'll be using our consultant for. I haven't gone through a lot of the updates. Our capital programs group was the one that went through and kind of commented on those updates. We were kind of deep in the permit when we were doing that. But some of it will be permit changes that are in the Eastern Washington manual that we'll need to update for. That's kind of what the consultant is going to be working on, is identifying what those changes are and how we get that.
So for instance, we have, I think as part of the stormwater management plan, we have details that talk about swales and where and how we're gonna calculate them, how they're designed, all that kind of stuff. And that's been in place for, I think, close to 2 or 3 decades now. We've got the CARE regs that can also be impacted. I don't know. I'm just trying to get a scope of how much or how aggressive this update is going to be. And is there going to be some significant changes to how we manage stormwater now versus what the new updated plan, for instance, PCBs, you know, that is, I think, part of our stormwater management plan. What are we anticipating changing, manage that?
Yeah, Commissioner, I'll speak to that. I briefly reviewed the permit changes and am familiar with both manuals, and I would tell you that substantially it's not going to be a change to what you see built on the ground.
Okay.
A lot of it is maintenance requirements, access to private facilities. A lot of those have changed with our permit, not necessarily the design events and the criteria that we use for sizing the facilities and the type of methodologies used for stormwater facilities.
Okay, thank you. That's what I was looking for.
Yeah, don't hold me to it, but that was my recollection. And
Oh, we got it recorded.
there was nothing to that level. So it was more to get in permit compliance, and a lot of that deals with reporting and maintenance, sort of.
Thank you.
Today's just the cost sharing, agreeing to that. We'll wait, you know, the final changes to it will be when the consultant is chosen and does their work. And then that comes back to us to adopt.
It will, yes, it'll be back through a process. Well, yes, see the changes, make sure they work with the Department of Ecology and then out through the public process.
Okay, just one quick follow-up. We can get more information later. But did Ecology update its Eastern Washington stormwater regs? Because that was an issue for many years. That there wasn't an updated regulation framework, especially if you want to use alternatives to grass in swales, like native plants and other alternatives. There was some issues years back about allowing for that per Ecology. And so I was just hoping, because I just hate to see swales be overbuilt, right? Using up valuable land, or we're forcing grassy swales that have to be maintained with fertilizers and mowing when there's other native plants and other, is that stuff that you'll be looking at, do you think?
Yeah, so in the new Eastern Washington update, they actually allow for rock swales and
Okay.
without vegetation.
Okay.
So that's something that we could consider talking about and putting into our SRSM. But yeah, it's definitely going more away from having to irrigate for plantings and sod, all of that, so.
Okay, just wondering, so, all right, well, more info to come, but thank you.
All right. And then, thank you. Thanks, Krista. And then the second item is for me, on the agenda as well. Yeah, all right. So the second item is for our NPDES permit at the Regional Water Reclamation Facility. And this is some sampling that we're required to do. And so Amy Sumner is going to talk through this, and she manages this project.
Yes, so good morning, and we had an RFP out for a consultant to conduct our NPDES sampling for our influent and effluent at the Spokane County Regional Water Reclamation Facility. We got 2 responses to the RFP, and the staff that reviewed the responses are recommending that we go with Landau Associates. So there will be a request from the board to approve that contract moving forward.
And this is sampling for specifically for PCBs and PBDEs, the two really, really low level concentration parameters that we sample for. So we have used these consultants because they're able to spend enough time on this and sample the influent through challenging situations and then sample the effluent and then work with the contract lab to set them out. So this is a pretty high cost, and as we've talked with before about this sampling, but we continue it because it's required in our
Good. Seems like a good reason to continue doing it.
On a related topic, you and I've talked at one time about what it would take to make the water reclamation facility a true reclamation facility.
Yes.
And you'd said that it would require another bank of filtration and increase in that area. Have you had a chance to look at that any further and say, well, we could do this, and this to achieve that designation? And if you haven't, can you? Or is that something we have to contract out to somebody else to do for us? Or do we have the ability to do that internally?
Yeah, it's a couple of related pieces. That one of them is what is the intended use? So kind of the traditional use might be take it to a golf course and irrigate a golf course. So the first step is how do you get the water to that spot? And then the second piece on the reclaimed water side is having the confidence that the water we're producing meets the reclaimed water use standard all the time. And then if it doesn't, where does that water go in the meantime while you upgrade the filtration systems? And so at this point, we don't have capacity to put in another, essentially another redundant way to treat the water, or we don't have a place to put it other than the river. So the river is a great spot because it can take as much water as we can send it. And even if we're out of compliance with our NPDES permit, which happens on occasion, we're able to discharge it to the river. With the reclaimed water piece, it's the redundancy and the hitting that quality all the time is the piece that's pretty tough. Having storage you can't store, you can't pay for enough storage to put that water off to the side. So moving from the river is a tough place to go.
So I'm not talking about removing from the river. What I'm talking about is raising the quality of the water we discharge into the river. And so that's the threshold that has been suggested to me that I'm trying to ferret out. What does that look like in real dollars? And is that something that is achievable or not?
Okay.
And so that's what I'm really looking for. Not trying to divert away from the river or
something like
that. Is what you were saying, in order to do the work, to get to that higher quality.
Yes.
We would have to shut off putting it into the river while that work is being done. Is that what you were saying?
No, I wasn't. I think
No.
if you treat to a high level, like let's say that it's for urban irrigation, homes have sprinklers. There's communities that have that. That if you aren't meeting your standard for irrigation, you can't send the water to those homes because there's a risk for public health. And so if you aren't sending it to your customer, where are you sending it? And at this point, sending it to the river is a good spot. It can take a lot of water and we already have the infrastructure. And so I think to your point, Commissioner, would be if we want to look at the idea of wheeling it through the river to reuse at another spot, I don't know that you have to, we can look more closely. I don't know that you have to meet a reclaimed water use standard to discharge to the environment where it's dirty and there's risk for public health all the time. It hasn't been done that I'm aware of in the state where you wheel it through the natural system, through the stream. Can look more into that and to see what those requirements are, but I'm not aware where that has been done.
Let's get together and have a conversation about what that might look like. It might not be a big lift, it might be a Herculean lift, I have no idea. But it's been suggested to me that is a path that we might be willing to consider anyway.
And the real limiter on that, in my mind, in the Spokane River would be water rights. And so it would be having in-stream flow rule saying that even though we're discharging to the river, but there's not enough water to take it out someplace else. I think that would be the bigger constraint.
And what I'm told is that if we achieve this higher designation, that we don't need the water rights, we can transfer from that. So let's have a conversation.
Any other questions for Ben?
Right, thank you.
Thank you. All right, now we've got Deborah up for back-to-back items. We're gonna talk about a franchise, Comcast, and then sale of a tax title property. Take it away.
Morning, commissioners. I'm hoping that our outside legal counsel is on the Zoom. Mr.
What's his name?
Brian.
Mr. Grogan.
Grogan.
Ron will check.
In the meantime, this cable franchise is for the entire county. TDS has a cable franchise as well. This is for Cox Cable to have a franchise of the entire county. They've been serving the county for a number of years. So this is a renewal of their franchise.
You have Mr. Grogan up there, outside counsel.
Yes, just testing if you can hear my volume okay?
Yep, loud and clear.
Very good.
You want to ask something, Mr.
Well,
Ryan?
yes, so in past renewals with the cable franchise, we were able to acquire in exchange for the franchise other amenities, other equipment. I think, Channel 15 was part of that package and stuff. Is this update in that same, is it the same franchise that we're updating?
Yes.
And does legislation currently allow us to get those kind of considerations in exchange for the franchise?
I'm going to defer to our legal counsel, Brian Grogan.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, commissioners. If I could run through this quick PowerPoint deck, I think we'll actually get to that question, but I can zero in on that issue specifically as I run through this. It's about 8 slides, if that's acceptable.
Sure.
Okay. I'll just kind of cue the, there we go. Thank you. As we look at this issue of cable franchising, one thing that we just need to state that's obvious to all of you is it's a changing industry. What used to be considered almost a utility, the provision of cable television service, is now switched largely to a division between streaming services, those who prefer traditional cable television. All of these companies use your public rights of way and your assets to install their facilities. The difference here is that gas, electric, water, telephone, those are all regulated at the state level, and many of them have rate regulations, so they can't charge more than what the Utilities Commission will allow. Cable, on the other hand, is regulated at the county level or at the city level, as the case may be, and it's a non-exclusive franchise that gives them the right to use your streets, and as the commissioner just mentioned a moment ago, typically in return for certain obligations, the primary one of which is a fee payment that basically is a rental payment for the use of your streets. Keep in mind that any cable company can charge whatever they choose. There is no more rate regulation in the United States for any community. So they can charge what they want for their services, but in return, they pay, in this case, the county, a percentage of those revenues as a rental payment. They only have to pay them on cable TV, not on broadband, not on any other communication service that they may use their system for. And because today the more demand from our constituents is for broadband services, we still don't have any authority under state law or under federal law to impose an obligation like a cable franchise on a company that solely wants to provide broadband services. And if we could flash forward and think of 5 years from now, when the world may be entirely looking at streaming options for video services, that is an issue that you'll want to keep an eye on to see what the state and feds will do to authorize you to make sure that you can receive some compensation for these for-profit companies trying to use, county assets. We can go to the next slide. In this case, Comcast franchise has not been renewed for over 30 years. Some might be a record, at least in my career, for the longest standing franchise that hasn't been renewed in the interim. These typically are renewed every 10 or 15 years. The last time that the county actually renewed this was way back, actually the term ended in 2007. So there was an extension, but nothing has happened since that date. The reason this all came up is because the county was approached by a competing cable operator called TDS. And that came about back in 2021 while we were still kind of coming out of the COVID pandemic. The county acted on TDS's application, went ahead and granted them a competing cable franchise in May of 2021. And then shortly thereafter, the county went ahead and modified its county code, Chapter 740, to address additional franchising issues. So all of that has been a buildup then to this process with Comcast, where we now have a document before the commissioners for consideration. Next slide. The key provisions of this franchise are really tied also to what we did with the TDS franchise. And the hope would be that we would have substantially similar documents for these companies so they could go out into the marketplace and compete, and may the best company win in terms of going ahead and obtaining subscribers. There are some differences, but for the most part, the big issues, we tried to remain consistent, non-discriminatory approach. So this is a 10-year franchise. In all likelihood, it will be probably one of the last cable franchises that the county may grant because of the evolution of this technology and what we see happening in the marketplace. You will receive a 5% fee on Comcast's gross revenues from the provision of cable service. So let's put that into context. If I'm a subscriber and I spend $200 on service, 100 of which is for broadband and 100 of which is for cable, the county only receives a 5% fee on the cable piece because that's what the law allows us. It does not allow the city, the county, or any other entity to impose an additional fee on non-cable services, nor on telecom services or on anything else that they may provide over that system. This franchise also contains pretty strong customer service standards. The hope in this case is with competition, the marketplace will drive that. But should that competition not drive strong customer service, we have several provisions in here that would allow the county to become, more aggressive in enforcing these standards. Right-of-way management is a key issue because we have the benefit of having updated Chapter 740 in 2022. Largely what we've done in this document is drive all of the regulations back to your existing right-of-way requirements. That way, if the county attorney's office should choose to amend those right-of-way requirements next year or the year after, this document will flow with it rather than have a different set of rules that would apply to a similar right-of-way user. Next slide. To the commissioner's initial question about, some quid pro quo often for the grant of a franchise. This franchise does require a commitment of local channels, and this is allowed under federal law. So we have a commitment for public, educational, and governmental, which has an acronym PEG, channels that are tied into this. This is consistent with what we did with TDS in their franchise as well. One thing is that we wanted the ability to have the City of Spokane government access channel carried to the residents in the county. And that will be, that's a contractual obligation now that Comcast will continue to provide that as long as that is made available by the city. We also will have a regional access channel that carries regional PEG programming on it. And then we've reserved a channel should the county ever in the future wish to have its own dedicated channel for county programming. Right now, there hasn't been a strong need or desire to push forward on that, but again, in reserve should we need it. And all of these channels would be carried in high definition and standard definition so that no matter the technology that your constituents have, they'd be able to view these programs. Contract also includes an additional 0.5% fee for support of the PEG capital expenses. And let me break that down. This is over and above the 5% fee. So, in past franchises, there may have been maybe an upfront grant or maybe a dollar amount put into the contract. The more typical trend line these days is to have this payment flow with the revenue that the operator derives from the operation of its cable system. So here we'll have this additional fee. However, this fee has to be earmarked for capital expenses. It can't be used for general fund or operational purposes. And that again is driven by the Federal Cable Communications Act, which stipulates that that is the intended purpose of this additional fee. Next slide. A couple more of the provisions in the franchise. It has some strong enforcement provisions, a performance bond and a security fund, again, consistent with what the TDS contract has. We hope to never have to use these, but should we have a company that fails to perform, these are tools that the county attorney's office would have to be able to bring the company into compliance and or cover any outstanding obligations that we may incur as a result of their operation of the system. Comcast will also maintain its existing connection to the county public works building so that we can transmit this PEG programming, particularly as a need may arise in the future if we were to exercise the option for our own channel. They'll continue to provide complimentary service to 6 specific locations, which are identified in an exhibit to this franchise at the end of the document. So those would be free services so that our employees at those buildings would be able to see specific cable programming. One thing to note on these additional obligations, and this goes to the commissioner's earlier question, there has been a change in federal law. Back in 2019, the FCC adopted an order that said you can only require so many things in a cable franchise related to fee obligations, PEG support, but other things that they label as in-kind obligations. And there's a lengthy definition in the FCC order. The operator may have the authority to basically offset those against the franchise fee payments. So we have language specifically in this contract that says if and when they would ever choose to exercise those rights, we would have the ability to revisit any provisions that may be impacted and decide whether to continue forward with those obligations or reassess whether a change would be needed. For now, Comcast has committed that they expect no change in this. They've signed this agreement. They believe it to be fair and reasonable. And so we are aligned with them regarding the terms of this agreement. I think the final slide is next. So the recommendation of county staff is to adopt this franchise. Again, Comcast has already accepted and executed per our request to make clear to the commissioners that they fully accept all of these provisions. The agreement is specifically referred to as the Spokane, Washington Comcast Cable Communications Franchise Agreement, if that were necessary for any motion or resolution that the commissioners may put forward. So with that, I'll pause and certainly stand for any questions that you may have.
Questions? No questions. It's a great presentation. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay. So is this something that would go on a future consent agenda? Right?
It will be an open hearing. And it is on, I believe, March 18th. If I got that right?
Okay. So a month out?
Yeah.
Month out for a public hearing. Sounds good.
Yeah, you'll see a resolution for the notice next session and then.
Sounds good. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much.
All right.
All right, Deborah, back to you.
Yeah. I have a piece of tax title property. If you could go to the next slide. The city of Spokane has requested to purchase this tax title property. The building that you see here is, of course, burnt down, and they've spent quite a lot of money to clean up that burnt out building. So the principal amount of back taxes owed on this parcel is $501,666.46. And the amount of liens that the city of Spokane has against the property is $486,658.44. So the city is requesting to purchase the property, making the other taxing districts whole by paying $15,008.02. They would also pay for the recording and the excise tax of $314.50 in order to acquire this property. Any questions?
Did you find more apocalyptic looking photos? It looks like it's like
It's
Mad
flat.
Max or something. It's like, wow. Well,
Yes, it's totally flat. They've got all that taken out, but yeah.
any questions? Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Good.
Thank you.
All right, that brings us to Doug Chase.
Morning. We have a great presentation. We're excited to be in a position to proceed with acquisition, the first step on the current #1 ranked property. And Jonathan Smith here has a great presentation to go through next steps.
Thanks, Doug. So Doug and I are here to seek a resolution from the board to enter into an interagency agreement with the Department of Natural Resources and to submit a $25,000 deposit in pursuit of this property. This property, as Doug mentioned, is the current #1 ranked property in the Conservation Futures prioritized acquisition list. If the board supports our efforts, the parts will bring a resolution before the board for the February 25th legislative meeting. As you can see on this slide here, this is the current number one ranked property. This was updated in December of 2023, and we're about 4 years into the current round, so about 3/4 of the way through the round. Next slide, please. A little bit of background. In 2023, Parks submitted an application to the Department of Natural Resources Trust Land Transfer Program. This program seeks to transfer ownership of DNR owned properties to local and state entities through a competitive application process. Parks completed this process in 2024, but was unsuccessful. And so now we are continue to pursue this acquisition of this property through the Conservation Futures Program with this agreement and this deposit as the first step. This property is about 78 acres and is located a little more than a 1/4 mile north of Camp Saconnie. It is also adjacent to the Northwood neighborhood. As you all well may know, this area has several recreational properties, all in close proximity to one another. And so this would be a great addition to these properties. Some of these properties are held by City of Spokane, some are held by Spokane County. Next slide, please. And I just zoomed past this, but as you can see up there, that's the up in the left-hand corner, that's the property we're talking about. and the general location approximate the rest of the city. Next slide, please. And as you can see here, these are the other properties: Tamsacani, Beacon Hill, Shields Park, Minnehaha. They're all in very close proximity to each other. Next slide, please. As you can see here, that a connection to these other recreational properties has been studied, but has not yet been realized. So if we are able to acquire this property, Parks will continue to look for ways to establish connections, and we'll pursue those connections so that we can have more of a open space system. Next slide, please. Here's some pictures. One other item to note here as a contingency to the ranking of this property, the adjacent HOA committed to providing a public access easement through their property. This would increase accessibility on the south side of the property. As you can see, the property, I was there last June. The property is a very pleasant property, very accessible for people just walking. Slopes, if you want to do a little hike, there's some hiking, very gentle slopes. Flip through the next couple of slides. Nice shady mid-morning sun coming through the trees there. Next slide. The steps in the conservation features process marry nicely with the steps outlined in the interagency agreement from the Department of Natural Resources. If we can get an execution of the IA and submit the deposit, the DNR will pursue their due diligence. Spokane County will pursue our due diligence as well, and we hope to be able to bring a purchase and sale agreement to you for consideration here in the coming months. Next slide, please. So just as a recap, we're seeking an authorization for a resolution authorizing entering into this agreement with DNR and to provide a deposit to pursue this property. That we are open to any questions you might have.
What's the overall cost of the property? I see the $25,000 deposit. I don't see the total, and then I just see reference to remaining balance. What's the total cost?
It has yet to be appraised. So we will, that's one of the steps, the next steps after we enter into an agreement and provide the deposit. Deposit goes to supplying funds for DNR to provide their their background reviews and studies of the property. And it's just very typical for all these kinds of transfers.
And I think what's a little different is typically we wouldn't come see you. We have authority to do appraisals and do all of that. And then we come to you when we have a purchase and sale agreement. What's unique here is DNR has their own process. They will do an appraisal. We will do at least one appraisal. And in order to work through that, we have to have this interlocal on the front end. And that will begin it all, if you will. So we have this extra step, and they have certain due diligence items. A lot of it overlaps with us. And so I think what's unique is we're coming to see you before we've gone through that appraisal process. And our program, as you may recall, we will not pay more than appraised value for a property. And so it's a little different. And yet in that one slide, Jonathan, as he outlined, the two different processes, they do marry up really well. We feel very confident that each agency can carry out their process and work through hopefully to reach a purchase and sale agreement. So in which case we'll be pleased to bring that back to you if we're able to reach agreement per our program guidelines and per the different due diligence that's done ahead of that.
One of my concerns, it's zoned urban reserve. And correct me if I'm wrong, urban reserve is sort of the next type of land that is primed to be brought into the to the UGA for development. And so, I mean, not to say I wouldn't support this, but I mean, that's 77 acres that at least, I assume 10 years ago, the county would have, or 13 years ago, the county would have thought would have been prime for housing. So, I mean, it does sort of muddy the waters because DNR owns it, so, but, I mean, that's land that at least a little over a decade ago, we had envisioned being the place where housing would be during our next comp plan. So I'm kind of working against ourselves when to those ends. I mean, is that a concern of yours?
No, it's not a concern. And I know the neighborhood, this property has actually been nominated through a series of rounds and has effectively worked its way to the top of the list over time. Neighborhood's been really supportive of it.
I don't doubt that.
Yeah, it's not uncommon that we, as you know, we acquire property within UGAs for the city of Spokane. They don't always compete as well, but often they do, depending upon the circumstances. So based on the criteria, the property has found its way to the top of the list. And I think the community's certainly very supportive. And I would say this particular property had more community support than any other property nominated in the last round.
Okay.
So, and I think the
but I
formula
did-
that planning uses anticipates a certain amount of land not becoming available for development.
No, and it certainly does, but something that is designated urban reserve is sort of next in line, kind of high priority or high likelihood to be brought into the UGA. Was that a part of the discussion at all through this process? I mean, I'm not I am certain the neighbors would love to tie this up in conservation future. I mean, no doubt in my mind. But was that a part of the discussion at all about the underlying zoning and that this would be probably prime to be brought into the UGA for development?
I think it absolutely was from the standpoint of likelihood of development. So if that's one of the components related to the criteria evaluated is what is the likelihood of this property being available for as open space? And so anything that may have helped it score a little bit higher and on a certain set of criteria. There's, what do we have, 13 different criteria that are evaluated through that process.
Okay, so to that point, so the likelihood for development, is that used as a positive to bring something in or a negative to bring something into conservation futures?
It can be helpful.
To
The
prevent it from
threat
being
of development can be helpful in terms of elevating the importance for acquisition, so it's not developed and gone forever, if you will. But I think the strategic placement to the other properties, the public spaces there and linking, there's been, I forget the name of there's been a plan done in this area where we've identified a long range plan in coordination with one of the public, I think the Mountain East organization years back. So there's been a lot of planning and forward thinking on this area that all of which would have been considered carefully at the time of evaluation and the competitive review.
Mr. French?
When the appraisal is done, is the appraisal going to be based upon its development ability or as natural open space?
All appraisals are based on highest and best use. So if it's not zoned and in the UGA now, it would be based on what it is now, the current highest and best use. So if it can't be developed as a subdivision, then again, the appraisers would look at that. They might look at the UGA. I don't know exactly where. Is this outside of the UGA or in the UGA?
Adjacent to.
Yeah, so it's again just based on highest and best use.
So the highest and best use of urban reserve land is cluster development. I think the maximum number of units you can put on that is 10 units. So 7 Is this inside the city or outside the city?
I believe it's outside of
Have to be
city limits.
Outside the city, so would be real traditional.
Yeah, or they may sometimes the appraisers will speculate that they may recommend you sit on it 5 years and then.
Well, see, that's what I'm worried about is with DNR, you know, if they're going for the highest and best use and they're gonna sell this for residential. For 77 acres, I mean, that's a ton of money. As opposed to. You know, rural traditional.
No,
Limited
I
number
think
of
when we
houses.
looked at it, we estimated, again, just a way of possibly 1.5 million is what we're anticipating, but we just don't know. That was
Yeah,
based on informal conversations. We try to have an idea just in terms of managing the funds. We do have funds in the account. But ultimately, again, the next step would be to come back to you if we can reach agreement, and that would have to be within appraised value and supported and so forth.
Just a couple questions. So are you confident that if you were to move forward and do the appraisal, and if we were to purchase the property, that we'd be able to have this access, these different proposed routes that would connect the Camp Sakani to this parcel? It looks like you have some different routes that have been discussed.
Yeah, there's.
Because we wouldn't want to
planning that have
move
been
forward
done.
unless we knew we could get people from one conservation area to another, right, to access it.
Yeah, we have not spent too much time on that. Just, it's a cart before the horse type of thing.
I see.
So I think
Right.
it's more long-range planning, having that within a plan, and if property were to develop between now and that time. For
You could
example, they
create
circulate
a
for
trail or
comments,
something.
and we would certainly weigh in
I
to
know,
that.
It's a long
process.
game, right?
Yes,
Like
yes.
you get these pieces of property and then over time you're connecting the dots between them.
Which is very common
Yes.
in this work that we do, and we have had a lot of success over time. But it's the long game, absolutely the long game, and we have some pretty great examples of success along the way.
And then my other question was just with DNR, is there a reason why we weren't successful in just having them transfer it to the county?
I'll definitely share a thought on that.
Okay,
They
Jonathan, Doug.
Yeah, they completely changed the criteria in the program this last time, where it was all new. And so it was based on a different set of criteria, and I will tell you, I believe there were only 5 properties out of 22. I think there's a record number submitted compared to prior rounds. We have a new committee, new criteria, and ultimately the handful of properties that were recommended through TLT coincidentally were all tribally owned and to be acquired by tribal entities. So I believe it reflected very much the criteria and the new criteria and how it was weighted and what was a priority to the program in this last round. And so there were changes, I think, and we just were not able to compete, nor were any other county or city entities successful. In this last round, only tribes were successful in nominating properties that made it to that recommendation for acquisition.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, miscellaneous matters, I guess Commissioner Cuny was gonna talk about item 3A, which was a joint meeting between the city. She asked that we delay that until she is here. Pat, anything for media, press releases, proclamations?
Yes, I believe there's a proclamation coming. I will check on the timing related. I believe Commissioner Waldriff has agreed to lead that one. And then the next KSPS segment will be with Commissioner Jordan and that'll run for March. The last KSPS with the administrator from SRHD is live on our YouTube channel, so you can check it there. And then for the commissioners that went to Olympia last week, I have some additional packets left over if you would like them for sharing with legislators or meetings. And for commissioners going to Olympia, we also have packets which contain the legislative agenda and then the one pagers that have been revised with the commissioners, at least one commissioner's feedback. We have those printed and updated as well. So Sharissa or I can get those to you if you're heading to Olympia soon.
French?
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. No, I saw Jeff up there for a second and
He's
then,
coming over.
oh, he's coming over. Okay. I just was gonna follow up. Commissioner, or I'm sorry, Senator Riccelli was just following up on Plants Ferry, and so it sounds like everything's moving forward with
Good.
Senator Christian as well. So I was just going to, I was hoping we could circle back maybe next Tuesday on the conversation with John Colton and where we might want to focus our federal, if the Senate continues to have at the federal level an earmark program. We had a conversation last week about, oh, that was fast, Jeff. I was like, man, where'd he go? I just know that John was hoping we could circle back on if we did have a earmark request for Senator Murray or Cantwell's office for the next, the next federal budget. We had a brief conversation last week about options. And I just wanted to, I kind of reflected on the conversation because we had discussed maybe asking for funds about the upgrade to our boiler system and electrical system here on the campus and whether or not that would be the right fit but the more I think about it, it's a huge price tag. I mean, it'd be nice to have some funding to help buy down that cost. And it has major public safety and criminal justice implications for all of our buildings here that run on those systems. So I don't know if we want to circle back with John on that, but I know there was a concern about like a federal nexus, but I don't.
House side.
But that's only on the House side. So if we were going to pursue this with Senator Cantwell or Murray, it would be not an issue. So anyway, I just wanted to flag that because I know you're going to be going to DC. I'm going to be going to DC next week, and so is Chair CUNY. So it might be a good thing to circle back and get some board feedback to John on that so we can come to agreement on what we want to ask for. So those are just some thoughts. And I did try and reach out to Commissioner CUNY last week, but you guys were all in Olympia and busy having fun. So I didn't hear back about what her thoughts are on it. But if we don't have to have that federal nexus for the Senate side, then I know that was a concern we had last week, but I don't think that's still a concern then.
I mean,
Anyway.
the final rules aren't out, but the Senate has never had that. Senator Collins as chair doesn't strike me as her style. So I doubt we get it on the Senate side. I assume it will stay on the House side. That's not finalized yet either. But I expect we'll have all of last year's.
Anyway, John just seems very antsy to have us make a decision so that when we're over there this spring and winter and spring, we can
The better.
hopefully get support for whatever it is we decide that we want to focus on. So anyway, that was just, I was just saying my Representative Riccelli or Senator Christian and Senator Riccelli sounds like they are good to go. You might want to just circle back with them today because he was just checking in on the Plants Ferry and making sure we were moving forward.
Plants Ferry is in. They only allow, I assume it's because of if people do it by district, they allow 2 reps and 1 senator. They're drop-down boxes.
I see.
So I only put in Riccelli. Although I believe it was Foley who was also willing to let his name be used. In the spirit of bipartisanship, I went that way. So we had 2 Republicans on the House side. And no, I did not do that. My bad. misspoke, sorry. We went with Senator Christian.
Right, no, that
Because
was what-
Richelli said he would be
That's
number
what he
two,
wanted. And he
but there
just,
was
I
no
think-
place for number two.
So if you could
So we
just
need
forward the
Richelli
narrative to
to-
him, so he knew that,
Perfect.
yeah, okay. He was just following up to make sure, cause he really wants to support the third turf field, so anyway, just
So
if
I
you could
will
just forward the
forward it to,
narrative.
it'll be just a narrative because when it goes in, it just says it's gone in. You actually don't get to print it out. Annoys me, but it's how it works.
Anyway, that was just one thing, but I was just gonna bring up that federal conversation again and see if there's any other ideas or thoughts.
So, the first week in March, I'm supposed to be in DC. And that's with STA, and we're doing a whole dog and pony about public transportation and all of that with FTA. While I'm there, we are trying to schedule a meeting with Cantwell on the hydrogen fuel cell plant, because this is something that she's had high on her priority list, and I wanted to socialize and make sure that she was aware that we were moving forward, and any help that she might have in making that happen, that'd be an opportunity. So those are the two things that are on my list for being in DC for. And stuff, so, and you and Mary are gonna be there
I'll
next
be
week?
there with the National Boards of Health
Okay.
conference, and so I was willing to go do some other visits
Yeah,
on behalf of the county if that was needed, and so John was planning to help with those. But I think he's just trying to circle back and find out if we have agreement on what we want to ask the senators for in terms of congressionally directed spending, right?
And also, if you want something in GSI's federal agenda, it was due yesterday at 5. And fairly confident we could beg for mercy with the holiday, but I think that mercy would end today. I've gone back and forth a little bit with Jake, so I think if you have something, I've sent you all around the link. I just sent it to you, Ron, if you want to pull it up. Generally speaking, all of last year's things at GSI move forward. So last year we put in the tech hub, we put in a broadband one, Erin and I tag teamed that one. We had the Northeast PDA childcare facility. We had the Fairchild Air Force Base frontage road, second gate. We got some of that funded through Kathy's office. We asked for 5. I think that one came in at 2s and 3s backwards, but it was either 2 or 3 million. So there'll still be some more we could ask for there. We also had the stabilization center at 4, we're in for 3. Those are just ones I pulled up on a quick read through that would still be moving forward. And we'd adjust numbers accordingly best we can, since the budget actually hasn't passed yet. So we actually don't know that we have the Fairchild or the North or the SRSC. So I'd probably ask them to leave them in. Maybe by the time they go to print, we will know what the federal budget's doing. Is there anything new or different to add?
so go ahead. Are we getting any sense yet about the direction that the administration is going to take with regard to either raise grants or build grants or whatever might be coming down the pike with regard to investments?
I can ask John. I have not heard anything yet. One way or the
I
other.
asked John last week and he had not heard anything.
I think of the Trump administration as being road infrastructure on that. I wouldn't wage any bets one way or the other though, at this point, not having heard.
Well, I know that in the first term, they were very much infrastructure oriented, but they had a metric that said, in the evaluation, it was linked to jobs. So how much were you investing in the infrastructure and what was going to be the return in terms of number of jobs? So they had a cost per job metric in the build grant and stuff. And so that's what I was trying to get a sense of is there going to be a similar metric to that this time? Or is there going to be some other metric that's going to help influence where they're going to spend investment money at?
I believe the transportation secretary has been approved, that Sean Duffy, former member. of
Duffy,
Congress, I
yeah.
think. So I'll nose around the website, see what I find, check in with Colton, see what he might know. But I don't have any right now to share.
So, right. Was Duffy Transportation or FAA?
Pretty sure he's transportation.
He's
He was-
transportation.
He was known
Is
for
he?
transportation. in the
Okay.
House. I think he was chair at one point.
Okay.
I think his father might have been too. I think it's one of those generational.
Yeah, for some reason, yeah. Okay.
So are we good at just letting GSI kind of keeping these in that we had from last year and going from there?
So with the GSI, it doesn't matter if it's a earmark request or just in general, a policy or a.
They do
budget.
both.
Yeah.
Both the policy
looking
and
for
the.
Yeah.
The dollar amounts, the Northeast PDA Fairchild Road and the Stabilization Center are at the very end of the document with dollar amounts. Those were specific capital requests. The tech hub and broadband were more. They were asks, but more in a general statement, not dollars attached.
Well, if we wanted to ask for several million towards our energy upgrades, facility upgrades here, would it behoove us to have that on the list or does it matter?
I don't think that's, GSI is looking for things that are more regional.
Right,
And so I don't
right.
know
So
that would be as appealing.
I'm fine with leaving those same ones on there that
Okay.
Yeah.
from last year. I don't see any downside.
So I'll let
The
them
Fairchild
know.
Gate, yeah.
I'll let them know that we have the amounts we have in the current budget if it passes. And then they can deal with that accordingly. And then one other quick item, if we're done with budget. Just an FYI with Workday, we're trying to get a lot of emails from staff around the county, so I might percolate to you guys too. Relate up to. That all one word. There's a lawsuit in Seattle, there's a lawsuit in California on the payroll side of Workday. That it didn't get implemented well. Class action lawsuits, people are seeing it in the news, we're hearing about it. We are planning on 3+ months of parallel payroll. Where people starting in March, if everything goes as currently planned, people are still being paid from the current system. But we're doing everything also in Workday, make sure everything is coming out correctly and doing, 6 to 8 checks and probably some fixes along the way. So we are aware of the situation. Primarily the one in Seattle makes our news the most. We think having this parallel plan will help us see if there are issues to correct. I just want you guys to be aware of that. So I wouldn't be surprised if you get asked about it along the way, based on the way it's kind of bubbling up right now.
It's in Oregon.
Is that
It's in Oregon.
an Oregon one also?
Oregon.
That's
Payroll.
So I heard last week. And I don't know whether there's any legitimacy to it at all. But I just want to share it so that you can put it on your radar. With the. And we heard it again on Saturday. With the financial crisis that the state is in. And there's not unanimity with regard to how they're going to approach it yet. There was speculation that there might be, it might create the incentive to delay some of the deadlines for energy conversion because the state doesn't have the money to do its side of the equation either. I don't know whether there's any truth to that or not, But it was speculated last week when I was in Olympia by a couple legislators, and maybe there's some traction to it, maybe not, but just, you know, if you find out whether there's any truth to that or not, it might help influence our timetable anyway.
I haven't heard anything about getting money to the ground. I think there could be a lot of state issues, as you know, a lot of federal money flows through the state. And what's going on at the federal level, everybody's watching, could impact the state. And it could impact a lot of things like that. There's gonna be less federal money flowing at this point. I used to know the percentage of the state budget that's federal. I don't recall it off the top of my head, but it was a significant number. Let's say north of 25%.
Oh, and good news, sorry, just saw my email that Representative Hill's office did get back to me. And
Stabilization Center.
and she's wanting to support the stabilization center and just ask that you fill out the capital budget request.
So put that one under her, Graham, and can we do Richelli on that one also? Anybody on that?
I mentioned it to him, but I wasn't sure how everything was gonna fall out with other asks. Cause is he the first on any other of our
Not
asks?
that I have put in, no.
Okay. I can follow up after this and reach out.
So I will send Richelli the Plants Ferry. I will do the stabilization center under Hill and Graham. And please let me know if anybody has a senator to add.
You might want to consider adding Holy. For some reason, I want to think that he played a role with the current stabilization facility.
Makes sense with his law background.
That was the nexus.
Yeah.
Right. And then can I ask a question? With regard to the joint meeting with the city council. When we've done that before, and it's been decades ago, we always had an agreed upon agenda and topics. Otherwise, you become very centric about somebody else's agenda and none of yours gets on the table and stuff. And so I'm not sure what is anticipated here, but it would be, I think, helpful if all of us kind of started pooling in some of the topics that we want to have a conversation with the other side of the river.
Yeah, that was asked, I guess, to be put on there by Commissioner CUNY, and then she asked us to punt it to next week when she's back. But yeah, anybody have any indication?
Conversation starter. Yeah,
Okay.
I think some of that stuff would likely come up under that.
And
I'm not aware
my
of
whole
anything.
time on the commission, we've never had a joint meeting. I think
The last time we did it,
it was around land use, wasn't it? Like,
it was around,
GMA
so we
type stuff.
did one on GMA, and this is when we were adopting the update in 2013, and that was Richard, Milky and myself. And then we did one with the city of the Valley, but I forget what the topic was of that one. But since I've been here, I can only remember that we've had two.
we'll have that kicked to next week. Okay. All right. Any other miscellaneous? Okay, you did have some executive sessions?
One exec.
Okay. Did you want to do that today or this morning, or did you want to do that?
One for this afternoon.
Oh, you did? Okay.
So,
Well, aren't you?
this morning would be pending and potential litigation under RCW 4230.110.1I. About 25 minutes, no action. Like the board here, CEO Scott Simmons, Budget Director Jeff McMorris, myself, and DPA Devin.
Okay, so it is 11:46. We'll be going into executive session for the stated purpose. And at the conclusion of the executive session, in which no decisions will be made, we will adjourn for the morning and we will reconvene at our 2 o'clock legislative meeting in our hearing room.